Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing? Is everyone surviving the Florida cold? It's here, y'all. Also, I love that we're Christmas ready here already. You know, I had a neighbor that the day after Halloween, he took down the Halloween decorations and put up the Christmas decorations. I was like, he's ahead of the game. But I think I might just be behind at this point. So I gotta get my life in order. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. I figured for tonight's topic, we could talk a little bit about how do we take the stuff that we read about, talk about, preach about, right, and really apply it to our daily lives. After all, Spiritism is part philosophy, science, but we've got to be able to move beyond just a philosophy, right? So the goal of tonight's topic is really to talk about what are some tangible resources, some different ways that we can go beyond just the things that we read and the things that we hear all the time, but really talk about practical ways that we can implement all of those things in our lives here, and so really kind of move beyond just the theoretical and really go into the practicality there. And one of the big things is, Allan Kardec is always reminding us that Spiritism is not just a faith that's based on words, but more importantly, it's a faith that's based on our actions and us being able to carry out all of those things that we're learning. So for tonight's topic, we're going to talk about a little bit about revealing the divine law, what that really means, what the law of God is, some ways to be able to apply that and transform our lives, how that plays into living a faith of courage, and then last but certainly not least, some, again, key takeaways as to how we can go about implementing that in our daily lives. So, to get us started, in the Spirits book, there is a question that Kardec asked the spirits, which was, where is God's law written? Who knows? In your gut? You went like this. In your gut. Conscious, very close to the gut. Conscious, very close. Anybody else? Everybody agrees? A little bit of both, right? So it is in our conscious. And so the neat thing about this, right, is it is not anywhere external. I don't need to seek it out in other places. I have that within me. And if we stop for a moment here, and we think about the times where maybe we are unsure about something, how we're going to respond to a friend, a family member, how we're going to take action on something at work, we might struggle with what we're going to do or what we're going to say, but do we know what the right thing or the wrong thing is? Most of the time, we usually do, right? Because that law, kind of that righteousness, is within us. It is in our conscience. But the challenge is oftentimes getting all of the outside noise away to be able to connect and actually listen to our conscience. And so one of the other questions, almost, kind of a follow-up, was, since Jesus has already taught the true laws of God, of what value are the teachings given by the spirits? Do they really have anything more to teach? Right? So Kardec is essentially saying, hey, look, if, you guys have told us that Jesus is that model, it's the individual that we should look up to, who we should aspire to become. And so isn't all of the things that he has taught us enough? Why do we need more? Right? That's essentially what they're asking there. Is there more that the spirits can teach us if kind of seems like Jesus has taught us everything? And the answer that the spirits gave was, Jesus' teachings were frequently allegorical and in the form of parables, because he spoke according to his time and place. But today, the truth must be made available for all. Our mission is to awaken eyes and ears in order to confound the proud and unmask the hypocrites who display virtue and religion outwardly in order to hide their inner turpitudes. The teachings of the spirits must be clear and without error so that no one can claim ignorance. And that last piece there probably should have been the disclaimer that I had for our talk today to give you all the opportunity to run away. Because the one thing with Spiritism is that once we study, once we know, we can no longer claim ignorance, right? I can't say I didn't know. And so what the spirits are telling us here is that, look, Jesus spoke in a certain way because that was what was needed at that time. That was the way that people would be able to understand the teachings. And if we look through a lot of the parables from that time, if we were to look at them in their very literal sense, some of it can be a little bit confusing, right? So the idea here is that Spiritism isn't coming to change the things that Jesus taught us, but it is coming to clarify, right? To help us put those parables, to paraphrase those and be able to apply them to our daily lives. And so that's the idea of the awakening the eyes and ears there, is to, in other words, hey, look, Jesus taught us and told us, the way to behave, taught us about the morals and the character, but clearly it hasn't landed yet, so let's try a different way, right? And so Spiritism really is here to be able to clarify and make it so that we do have it as a resource and as a tool to be able to carry out those teachings of Christ there. And so really understanding the Spiritist doctrine is really just the beginning. It's really when we take all of those teachings and put it all into practice is where the real work begins there. And so as we carry on, in question 630, there's a question that says, how can we distinguish between good and evil? What do you all think? How can we differentiate? Is there a way? Is there a formula out there? A way that we can say, if we do this thing, we're going to know every single time. What do we think? Any guesses?
Intention.
Say it again? Intention? Yeah, that's a good one. For sure. Yep. Yeah. So being able to put ourselves in someone's shoes and figure out, would I like this thing to be done to me, right? And it all aligns with that. So what the Spirit said was, good is everything that is in harmony with God's law, whereas evil is everything that deviates, that moves away. It's contradictory to that. Thus, doing what is good conforms to God's law, while doing evil infringes it, right? And so, okay, so if we kind of summarize what we know so far, we know that God's law is written in our conscience, right? If we take the time to think things through, if we look at our intention when we're doing something, others' intention, our ability to put ourselves, in somebody's shoes, we have all of that knowledge inside us. And so they kind of go on and say, okay, so that knowledge is within us, right? I have control over that. I don't need to seek it out externally. But do I have the means of, kind of going through, and I just realized that now the question in there was kind of pasted incorrectly, but you'll look that it's still kind of like a further, hey, when we believe in God, there's that desire to know the difference, but God has also given them the intelligence to discern from one another, right? So we know it's within us, and we know that we have the means, we have the ability, the capability to be able to decide. But why is it so hard? Or is it just me who thinks it's hard? Why do we think if the spirits are telling us all these things, that it's inside us, we don't need to seek it externally, we know what the law is, we know that it's the things that bring us closer to God, and that we have the means to be able to discern it, what makes it so difficult?
Because we're simple and lacking knowledge in our ego and our pride.
Yep. Ego and pride, those are very big ones. How often do we know what we need to do, but we can't do the thing that we know is the right thing because of ego and pride, right? Because we'll find a better way. Because there's a better way, because so and so can't possibly be wrong, right? Ego and pride are two of the biggest factors that get in the way of our own advancement. But we oftentimes choose to take that hardest path. It's not because we don't know, right? Would you all agree with that? Very rarely is the question, I truly don't know what the right thing to do is. Very rarely that's the question. The question oftentimes is, how do I go about doing the thing that I know is not the right thing, but I want to do it that way?
Because it's very difficult to control passions.
Absolutely. It's difficult to control passions. It's difficult to give in at times, right? We want to have the last word. We want to win the argument. We want to be right. But we know what the right thing is inside us. And so a big part of the challenge, right, is being able to filter our actions, the things that we say, through, does it align with God's law, right? Does it align? Does it bring me closer to God? Does it align with the things that Christ taught? And, you know, the challenge, I think, a lot of times is folks think that freedom is the ability to do whatever we want. But the reality is freedom is the ability to choose the right thing, even when that is the hardest thing, which usually it is, right? The right thing isn't usually the easy thing. It's actually quite the opposite. But that's where the merit is in doing what's right, even when that right thing is the most difficult thing, even when it is the most uncomfortable thing, which it oftentimes is. But where's the merit if it's just going to be easy and simple and, you know, we're not involving in that way? And so, again, right, we're not saying here that it's easy, but what the spirits are telling us is it is doable. The answer is inside us, and we have the means to be able to do it. And so, as we talk about, you know, this key to transformation here, question 919 asks, what is the most effective means for improving ourselves in this life and for resisting the draw of evil? Any guesses out there? No wrong answers, because this is just going to be what the spirits are telling us, but y'all may have even better formulas out there. But what do we think? What are some of the ways that we can improve, you know, that resistance against the ego, the pride, the instinct, and resist kind of that draw towards the challenges? Is there anything that you all do that kind of help you ground yourselves? Come over here, yes. That's a great way for sure. I mean, who wouldn't? We're going to put a table out there and she's just going to answer questions for us all day. But yeah, and one of the things that the Spirit said was, know thyself, right? Know your true inner self, our true inner self. What are the things that trigger me? What are the things that annoy me? Right? What are the things that I need to improve? How can I learn how to deal with my challenges if I don't know what the challenges are even to begin with? Right? If I'm someone who gets annoyed by somebody in traffic, why am I getting annoyed? If I get annoyed every time somebody talks about a specific subject, why am I getting upset? Right? I can't fix that unless I ask myself those questions and I say, okay, why is it that this thing bothers me? Why is it that when I see so-and-so, it sets me off in such a way and I behave very unlike myself? right? That's what the spirits are telling us. Is they're quoting Socrates and they're saying, look, get to know yourself. And in this particular question, a little bit later on, St. Augustine comes and says, do what I used to do when I was living on the earth. At the end of each day, I examined my conscience, reviewed what I had done, and asked myself whether or not I had failed to fulfill some duty, and whether or not anyone might have had reason to complain about me. Look at how incredible that is. And also simple, right? Does that seem doable for us to just, at the end of each day, reflect on the day and say, okay, was there perhaps an opportunity to do good that I just chose not to? Did I respond to someone in an unkind way? Did I do all of the possible good that I could have done throughout the day? Is that doable? Do we think we can do that every day? Pretty doable, right? And so when we think about this, though, it is important that we see this as a resource, not to bring out guilt, right? But to inspire growth. And what I mean by that, this should not be an exercise where at the end of the day, I go, oh my goodness, when I responded to my boss, I should have said X, Y, and Z, and then I ruminate on that for hours and days and weeks, right? That's not what we're talking about here. But what we are saying is to take a moment to reflect on the opportunities that we've had throughout the day to carry out the teachings of Christ. And I would even add here, I have a friend who says, when I struggle to process things or to figure out whether, a certain action or something that somebody told me is morally accurate or not, the filter that I use is thinking whether that's something Jesus would say or do. Right? That's not a very simple filter. Did I act in such a way that aligns with everything that I read about Christ? Can I imagine Christ saying such a thing? Right? A very simple filter that we can also add here to be able to reflect. And here's the thing, right? We're not going to reach that perfection from one day to the next, but that daily reflection calls us back and helps us also realize the improvements that we're making every single day. Think about when you're learning a new skill, it's the practice that makes us better, right? It's that repetition. And the ability to reflect on all of these things on a daily basis does exactly that. Because we may get to the end of a week and realize that that thing that used to bother us is not bothering us as much. Or we may get to the end of the week and realize that that one specific situation that happened in months past, we would have handled it completely different in a very poor way. But yet, here we are now being able to reflect on those little wins, because it is going to take time, right? It is not about the how fast we're going to get there, but the fact that we're putting in the time and effort, and little by little, we're starting to make that transformation, right? So St. Augustine's suggestion there is something that's very, very simple that we can start to apply to our daily practices there. So again, little summary. What we know so far is God's law is written in our conscience. The way that we kind of carry that out is being able to do the things that align with the teachings of Christ. We have the ability of being able to discern right from good, or bad from evil, or bad from good, right from wrong. And a nice way to be able to do that is to just reflect, right? To question ourselves. And through questioning that, we'll slowly get to know ourselves, and then from there be able to transform our lives. And so the next piece here is kind of, how do we, now that we know this, right? We've got the theory down, but the next part is the taking action. And there's a section in the Gospel according to Spiritism that talks about the courage of faith. And when we think about this piece right here, right, is we talked about how it's not always easy to be able to carry out a lot of these things that we think about. And I think even more so nowadays, where everything gets criticized. Everyone has an opinion about something. Anything could be a cause of conflict. You sneeze, somebody tells you that you sneezed very loud, and it's an argument, right? It does take courage to be able to do all of the things that we're talking about, right? And so in this section here, there's a passage from Matthew that says, everyone who confesses me and acknowledges me before men, I will acknowledge and confess before my Father who is in heaven. And anyone who denies me before men, I will deny before my Father who is in heaven. And the last piece of this is, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his glory and in the glory of his Father and all the holy angels. So both of these are in Matthew and in Luke there. And some of the explanation that the spirits give in both of these here are under that parable of not hiding, the lamp under a bushel, which is essentially telling us, hey, we can learn all of these things, we can have all of that inner knowledge, but if we're not sharing that, it won't do us any good, right? Why are we hiding that light somewhere in a back corner when we have the ability of helping, of inspiring, of supporting everyone that is here incarnated with us, right? The transformation starts from within ourselves, but we also have a moral duty to be able to help all of those along the way. And so when I read this, the question that comes to mind is, if I were to make the transition to the spiritual world today, would I be happy with the life that I've lived here? Was it a meaningful enough life? Did I do everything that I could have to be able to carry out the teachings of Christ? Did I use every opportunity to help others? Right? And when we think about this is, again, right, not easy. It does take courage. But think about the impact that we can have to be able to touch those lives that have not yet had the same privilege and opportunity that we have had to know all of these things here. It's a silly example, but think about a really cool restaurant that you've been to, that you go and you tell friends about. This is no different. The only difference is that the impact that it's going to have is when you tell somebody about a cool restaurant, they'll have a nice meal. But this right here, it's going to help them for the entirety of not just this life, but for all of the subsequent lives that are yet to come there. And so when we think about this, right, the character piece is kind of that moral structure, but the courage is really what takes that faith to the next level. Because faith, by just having that knowledge within us, if I go to the spiritual world today and I can recite all the parables, I can tell them that question 777 asks blah, 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 but I didn't do anything with that, it does me no good, right? So the call here is to not just study Spiritism, but to live through the lens of Christ, to carry out those teachings in our everyday life and through our actions. And so,
or just be Christian also, right?
Yep.
Not necessarily spiritist, but
Correct.
type of Christianity.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's a really good call out too, because not long ago I was actually having a conversation with a friend about religion and things like that, and I think it's always worth calling out that religion is merely a resource. right? It's a tool. And why I say that is I can read about everything that Christ preached and choose to not do anything with that. Right? It does me no good. And so when we talk about religion, it is meant to be a guide. There's no right or wrong religion. It's the religion that suits you, that helps you be a better human, right? For me, it's Spiritism. For some other people, it's a different religion. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I have met people who don't believe in God, don't believe in Jesus, and were some of the kindest people and some of the best Christians, because how we define a Christian is someone who believes in Jesus and carries out the teachings of Christ, right? That's, in very simple terms, is how we define a Christian. So, I can probably say that I've met Christians who didn't know that they were Christians. So, the religion itself is what we choose to do with it every single day. Me standing in a car does not make me, standing in a garage doesn't make me a car, no more than being a good person has nothing to do with religion. But I can use the things that I learn in that religion, right, to be able to transform the way that I live, the way that I speak to people, the way that I act. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. And so that's a great call out. Thank you, Valdu. And so in question 642, Kardec asked the spirits, in order to be pleasing to God and to ensure our future situation, is it simply enough not to do what is evil? Right? So the question is, hey, look, okay, you're telling me I've got to do all of these nice things, but if I just don't do anything bad, is that enough? What do we think? No, why not? What do you mean? Why not? Why is that not enough? Because you're not doing the good, yeah. And the answer was pretty simple. All must do good to the best of their abilities, for all will answer for all of the evil that has resulted from the good they left undone. So we're not just saying, hey, look, go out and as long as you don't do anything bad, you're good, because we're also responsible for the bad things that happen because of the good that we failed to do. Right? I mean, think about it. We're talking about all of the ways that we have a moral duty to be able to help others, and in helping others, we're also helping ourselves in the process. So being stagnant and just saying, well, I won't do anything bad, that should be good enough. Is that what Jesus did? No, right? And so it is far more than just avoiding the bad. It is seeking out every opportunity to be able to carry out the good. And that transformation, again, won't happen from one day to the next, but it is going to be a choice every single day. It'll be a small gesture. It'll be seeking out, the opportunities to do the good. And even though at times it may feel like something very, very small, right? It's going to be those little changes that will ultimately get us to a point where doing the good will just be a thing that we do without even thinking about it, right? That's the ultimate goal there. And then the next piece, there's this quote from John Wooden, who was an American basketball coach at UCLA. And one of the things that he said, he was very well known during his time. He won 10 championships in a 12-year time span, national championships. If you were alive, I would ask him to coach my soccer team, but that's neither here nor there. One of the things that he said was, reputation is what people think of you, and character is who you are. And why I thought that quote was so impactful and so aligned with the things that we're talking about is because we talk about the courage to take action as it relates to our faith, right? And now more than ever, society, social media has taught us to put a lot of emphasis on what people think about us. And how often do we hide that light because we are so afraid, we are petrified of what people are going to think, of what people are going to say. And we forget that what people say and what people think has nothing to do with us. It doesn't change who we are. It doesn't change our character. It doesn't change our morals. It doesn't change our values. And I guarantee that when we return to the spiritual world, they don't ask, well, do you know what so-and-so thought of you? Do you know that they thought that your hair looked a certain way and blah, blah, blah? That's not the thing that matters. But that is oftentimes the thing that gets in the way of us being able to share that light, to spread everything that we learn about here. And so to kind of, add to that piece of taking the courage, there's this quote from Brene Brown, who's a very famous researcher here in the United States. And in her book, Dare to Lead, she says that integrity is choosing courage over comfort. And what this makes me think of is the amount of times that we sometimes don't speak up. We don't take the unpopular stand, even though it's the right stand to take, because we choose our own comfort over doing the right thing. And one of the things that she says, it's a nice little exercise to kind of help with that courage. She says, hey, build your little square squad. And what she describes is taking a little piece of paper, a tiny piece of paper, one by one, and writing down the names of individuals in your circle, family, friends, but individuals who bring the best in us and are not afraid to tell us when we are not living by the values that we say we hold true to ourselves. People who love us not in spite of who we are, but individuals who love us because of who we are. And the reason why she encourages people to use that tiny piece of paper is because if we stop for a moment here and we reflect on individuals that we can count on to call us out when we've made a mistake, who will say, hey, I think you dropped the ball here, but I'm here to help you fix it, right? If we think about the individuals who are willing to not choose their comfort, that list is probably very small. Would you agree? Probably very, very small there. Because true courage is holding on to our values, to our morals, to our integrity, no matter the situation and no matter the person. Because right and wrong does not change based on who's taking the action. Would you agree? Does it change? Does wrong become right based on who did it? It doesn't, right? I'll never forget, I grew up with my mom telling my brother and I, and for those that know my mom, this is going to be very on brand for her, but she would say, if y'all do something illegal, I will be the first one to turn you in. And being young, I was like, Mom, what do you mean? And to me today, right, as an adult, it makes sense because it's not because we're her kids that we're going to get by with doing something that's wrong. And she would add too, she would say, and I'd be the first one to turn you guys in because I know that I've raised you to know what's right and wrong. right? So when we talked about the claiming the ignorance piece early on, we know these things, right? Again, we're not saying that it's easy, but it's important that we choose to embrace the discomfort and speak up for the right thing, to do the right thing. Especially because oftentimes we may run into situations where other individuals can't speak up for themselves. So there's, again, our moral duty to take the unpopular stand, to do what is right, and go beyond the theoretical and into the actual actionable things that Christ taught us. Has anybody here read the book 2,000 Years Ago, written by Chico Xavier? Perfect. Yeah, I see a few hands. For those that did not read it, I will not spoil it. But there's a chapter in that book. Well, first, let me back up. That book was written by the medium Chico Xavier, and it was channeled by Chico, and the spirit was Emmanuel. So that book tells the story of Emmanuel. Do you want to guess how long ago? You guys are sharp. 2,000 years ago, when he was incarnated here on earth, during the time that Christ was here on earth. And at the time, he was a high-ranking senator. And there's, to make a long story short, because I don't want to spoil the book, I highly recommend reading the book. I also recommend getting a box of tissues when you order the book. But essentially, there's a chapter in that book, and we have it here. See, no excuse. We have it here. We also have tissues here, I saw, so you're ready. Yes, yep. Yeah, the 50 years after will tell the next incarnation that he had. Also a really great book. But in that book, there's a chapter that talks about the kind of the whole book is the journey, but that specific chapter talks about the moment that Christ was crucified. And essentially what happened was, right, he had already been imprisoned, and Pontius Pilate, who was the governor at the time, and Emmanuel, his name during that reincarnation was Publius, and he was the senator of the time there. Essentially, Christ had already been imprisoned. They were trying to figure out with him. You got to think about the fact that at that time, people would go to, the parks and the open areas to watch people be stoned, whipped, killed to death, right? At that time, it was a spectacle. People would long for that stuff. And thankfully, we're not at that point anymore. But the reason why I tell you this story is Jesus had already been imprisoned. They got into a meeting to figure out what they were going to do because people were asking for him to be killed. And the senator had already had the opportunity to actually meet Jesus. And I won't tell you how he met, because again, I don't want to spoil it. But he had the opportunity to meet Jesus, and he said, look, people are talking about him being some kind of revolutionary, but honestly, I don't see any ill intent. Everything he's talking about, sure, is very different from what we've heard, everything that we've seen, but I don't see him as a threat. Because a lot of the concern was that everything that he was talking about was to gain political power and overthrow the Roman Empire, right? And so we have this very high-ranking senator who's saying, look, I don't see that happening. I mean, he's talking about some crazy things, loving one another and respecting each other and all that kind of stuff, but he's not a threat. He has not done anything to harm anybody. I don't see why we should do this to him. And so in this meeting, the governor, Pontius Pilate, says, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but the challenge is people are outside right now And they're telling us that we need to take action. They're telling us that they want to see him crucified. They want to see him killed. We're going to have to do something to appease these people. And that's when they come up with the idea to start whipping him. Pontius Pilate says, look, I don't want to do this, but we do have to do something because people are outside and they can't see us, as weak. We've got to be able to do something. So I think if we just put him out there, he starts getting the lashes, that's going to be enough for people. So that's the first thing that they do. And it wasn't enough. So they come back inside. The two of them are freaking out because they don't want to do this, but they've got the pressure outside. And that's when they come up with the idea and they say, you know what? I don't know that it's so much about Jesus that these people are worried about as much as it is that they simply want someone to watch go through all of that. So what if we take someone who is also in prison and we use that person? That way we can save Jesus from getting stoned, getting crucified, right? And we'll appease the people because they'll still get the spectacle that they came looking for. And it sounded like a wild idea, but they were pretty confident that, hey, there's no really reason for us to do this to Jesus, but they do need something, so let's get some other random guy here. And in fact, I already have somebody in mind because there's a hardened criminal that everyone was thrilled when he got taken off the streets. Everybody knows him. They know that he's a threat to society. So I am certain that if given the choice, they're going to choose this guy over Jesus. And for those who read the book, when Pontius Pilate went out there and brought in Barabbas and Jesus, who did they choose? Jesus. And even when that happened, they went back and talked about how they didn't want to do that because they didn't see any reason to do that with Jesus. But what in the world would people think if the governor and the senator didn't take any action? The reputation, right? The courage. And while it's been over 2,000 years ago, and we don't see that kind of situation nearly as much, at least not in our side of the world, although it does happen in other places still, there are many other actions where we still choose the comfort over the courage, right? Where we still don't speak up, where we still have a hard time choosing or doing the right thing because of the fear of what perhaps people are going to think and so forth. And so to kind of wrap us up here, I wanted us to tie it in with the parable of the sower, which is a parable that talks about the sower that was tossing out seeds in hopes of growing a strong crop. And there were some seeds that kind of fell by the wayside, fell on the rock. Birds came, just ate the seeds. Then some of those fell among thorns, started to grow a little bit, but then the thorns came and suffocated the seeds there. They were never able to properly sprout. And then finally some that actually fell on good ground and actually grew. And the explanation that the spirits give us here is whoever hears the word of the kingdom but does not heed it, the evil spirit comes and takes away what had been sown in his heart. This is the one who received the seed by the wayside. So these are the ones where we can hear the message, but it just ends there, right? It doesn't go anywhere. I can listen to 1,000 talks. I can read hundreds of books, but that seed does not grow. It doesn't go anywhere. And then there's the he who received the seed among the stones is the one who hears the word and receives it joyously as soon as he hears it. But there's no root inside himself, and it lasts only for a while. And when he's overcome by obstacles and persecutions on account of the word, he soon regards it as an object of offense and ruin. So those are the ones where I could come here, I could get really excited reading the message, but it only lasts for a short period of time because I haven't taken the time to get to know myself, to be able to cultivate that seed there. And so when those challenges come around, I toss everything that I've learned to the wind. The other one there, he who receives the seed among the thorns is the one who hears the word, but then the cares of the times and the illusions of riches choke the word within him, rendering it unfruitful. So if I hear all the things, I study all the things, but I am more worried about the challenges of the time, the illusions of what people are going to think, then the word still goes nowhere. And then the last one there, but he who receives the seed on good soil is the one who hears the word, who heeds it, and who produces a crop, rendering 100 or 60 or 30 to 1. And the idea here is that's the soil that we want to be, right? And when we are doing that daily reflection, that's another helpful one to add. What kind of soil am I being to that seed? Because the teachings of Christ and Spiritism is that seed. But our hearts and how we decide to act on our faith with courage, how we decide to transform our inner selves is that soil, right? So having just the seed is not enough. What kind of soil are we deciding to be on a daily basis? And so the last piece here, because we do kind of always, want to talk about, what do we do on the daily there is right underneath that passage in the gospel, the spirits come in and say, duty is an individual's moral obligation, first toward him or herself and towards others immediately after. Duty is the law of life. It is found in the smallest details as well as in the most elevated acts. Duty is the practical summary of all moral speculation. It is the courage of the soul who confronts the distress of life's struggles. So going back to, kind of that question, is it enough to just not do any bad? We have the moral duty, the moral obligation to carry out those teachings of Christ, right? First for ourselves, but also towards others immediately after here. And so the reflection here is that, again, right, the Spiritist doctrine is that seed, but our hearts and what we choose to do with that is the soil that will ultimately determine whether that seed can grow and thrive and spread, or if it's just going to fall by the wayside, if it's going to be eaten, and choked by the thorns or not. And so let us not just understand and study Spiritism, but the call to action here is to think of the ways that we can live Spiritism and move beyond the theory and into the practical side of things, and using that daily reflection to be able to ask ourselves, have I done all of the good that I possibly could have done? Did I make a mistake? And if I did, that's okay. We're going to make tons of them. But how do we use that as a learning opportunity as opposed to, something that's going to continue to hinder our evolution during this life here? So thank you. I appreciate y'all's kindness, attention, and participation, and have a good night.